Good evening, everybody. My name is Bernie O'Rourke, and I am the Extension Youth Livestock Specialist at UW-Madison. And we are super excited to have you all here tonight for the first Animal Science Educational Series. Both Sarah, Dr. Adcock, and I are from the Animal and Dairy Sciences Department at UW-Madison. And so we're really excited to have Dr. Adcock with us tonight to talk about animal welfare and animal care. So that's the plan for tonight. I'm just going to go through a few slides just to kind of orientate you on a few things with Zoom, which I'm guessing most of us are Zoom experts by now. But if we're not, just a few reminders, and then also just a little bit on conduct tonight related to the Q&A and chat feature. So we do have a chat and Q&A section with the webinar feature tonight. This feature, Zoom feature, you don't have a lot of engagement and interaction, just like you would with maybe a Zoom meeting that you would have had at school. But you can still engage with us through Q&A and the chat. Please make sure, and I'm going to move to this slide. It's kind of funny, right? We're looking forward to this great evening, but we really need you to work with us in making sure you have good Zoom etiquette. And I'm sure you all had those from school last year during COVID, but we're going to kind of remind you again to keep track of yourself and your manners. Leave the chat in the Q&A for questions only and not chit-chatting amongst each other. I actually have the chat just shut off, and it will just go to us, both Sarah and I. So please share your questions, and we prefer that you put them in the Q&A section of the webinar, okay? Just to let you know, here are the future ones. We're gonna have one in February all the way through May on the second Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock. Next month is gonna be super fun too. We're going to talk about how precision agriculture and technology helps us in agriculture. We're going to talk about robotics in dairy, autonomous tractors, lots of cool things like that, and how cameras and sensors help make agriculture economically viable and successful. So come next month. We'd love to have you. Okay. What else is pretty cool about this month's session is when you go back to the webpage that you registered, we will have some videos uploaded, and actually they are there, and we'll look at them at the end of the webinar tonight, just so I can orientate you as to where they are. But our friends and partners at Wisconsin Beef Council and the National Pork Board shared We Care videos, and so they are up there for you to review. The beef one is actually all about Wisconsin beef producers. And so Caitlin Riley at the Wisconsin Beef Council in Verona put that together for us. So it's about 11 minutes of really great content from your beef producers here in Wisconsin and how they care about animals. If you do want to receive educational verification for this evening's session, the link was in the confirmation email you received to get on the Zoom tonight. So go to that email and just click on the link, and that'll get you to that form. And hopefully, as per the directions in the email, you had printed that before you came to tonight's session. The next slide is just all of the links you can find us at. The first one is the website. And then the second one is the YouTube channel where all the recordings for tonight's session will be located. So for the whole series, and even last year's series that was really popular, they're all available for you. They will be roughly about a week later for you to review them, okay? Just so you know. And then at the end tonight, once you leave Zoom, it will shoot you to a survey. So when you close out Zoom tonight, it'll shoot you to a survey, and we really need you to fill those out because it helps us know what you want, what other details and topics interest you, and then what did you learn from tonight? That helps us out, okay? So I think I will stop the share and pass this on to Sarah. So yeah, just look in the chat and look in the Q&A. I don't see any questions. So I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Adcock. Dr. Adcock is a animal professor in the area of animal welfare. So she does a lot of research and teaching in this area of care of animals. And so I've asked her to come and talk. She's only been here in Wisconsin for, we were just talking about that, just a year and a half now. She came during the pandemic. So I don't know that I've worked with Sarah in person very often in meetings, but not a lot. And so we're excited to have her. And I will have her just start with just giving a little bit of her background as to where she went to school and where she's from, which is pretty unique and fun. And then she'll get right into the presentation. So go ahead, Dr. Adcock, and thanks for being here with us tonight.
All right, thanks, Bernie. So yeah, a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from Quebec in Canada. So I did my undergraduate degree in Montreal with McGill University. So I was on looking at biology and had plans to go into primatology, but then later on in my undergrad degree, I had this revelation that animal agriculture was really exciting field to go into. So for my master's degree, I moved out to Newfoundland, which is a province on the east coast of Canada. And I did research there with miniature pigs. So I was looking at their behavior and physiology and how that relates to their welfare. So I spent 2 years there and then had enough of the winters in Newfoundland. So I moved out to California and did my PhD degree at UC Davis, where I was working with dairy cattle and looking at disbudding in calves and how that affects their welfare. So from there, I came to UW-Madison, and yeah, like Bernie said, I've been here about a year and a half now, and it has been a unique experience being here during the pandemic. But yeah, very excited to be here to talk to you all tonight. So I'm going to be talking about animal welfare, and we have a lot of good stuff to cover, so I'll jump right in. We'll see if I can move this forward. Okay, so our roadmap for today is that we're going to start with just defining what animal welfare is, so we're all on the same page. And then we'll talk about how to assess welfare from a scientific point of view. And then from there, we're going to talk about how you can apply these principles to making sure that your animals are happy and well cared for. And then finally, we're going to talk about careers in animal welfare. Okay, so let's start with what animal welfare is. So I'd like you to take a moment just to think about how you define animal welfare. So maybe just jot down on a piece of paper or on your computer, or just have it in your head, but just think about what comes to mind when you hear the term animal welfare. So we'll give about 20 seconds for that. Okay, so keeping whatever came to mind about what welfare is, how would you evaluate this situation where you have a feral cat, so a cat that has lived their whole life outside, has never had an owner, versus a cat that is living in an animal shelter? So based on those two cats, who do you think has better welfare? So we'll put up a poll, and you have three options. So feral cat, shelter cat, or undecided if you're not sure.
Can you see the answer, Sarah?
Yeah, I can see everyone answering. So we're at about 70%.
Yeah, and they're still climbing. That's good. Keep going, gang. That'd be awesome if we got 100%. I don't know that I've ever had 100% participation in a poll. Well, maybe we're at 83. Oh, a few more. 84? All right, to keep this moving, let's end the poll and share. So that's what they thought.
Okay, so we have the majority of you said shelter cat has the better welfare. And then a couple said feral cat and a few were undecided. So that's really interesting. It is interesting that not everyone agreed on an answer. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide. So typically when we talk about animal welfare, people's concerns fall into one of three different groups. So the first concern that often comes up is related to animal health. So is the animal well fed? Do they have good hygiene? And are they free of diseases and injuries? So that's a very common concern that's raised. We also hear concerns about natural living. So is the animal able to express their full behavioral repertoire? So if they were living outside or living in the wild, would they be able to express those same behaviors if they were in a domestic setting? And then the third concern revolves around their feelings. So is the animal feeling good? So feeling a state of pleasure and not feeling bad, so not suffering. And really what determines these feelings is both that animal's health. So if you're not feeling healthy, you're not feeling really good, you feel it might be in pain or you might be feeling ill, but also their natural living. So if they're not able to express these behaviors that they're genetically hardwired to do, they're going to feel some frustration or anxiety or fear. So both health and natural living really determine how the animal is feeling. So if you said shelter cats, so most of you guys said shelter cats had the better welfare. So that would indicate that your concerns likely had to do with their health. So are they being well fed? Do they have good hygiene? And are they free of disease and injury? So in a shelter scenario, those things are typically well cared for. But then on the feral cat side, that animal has more opportunities to engage in their natural behaviors. They can roam around on the streets, they can capture prey. So they have much more freedom to engage in some of those natural behaviors that a shelter cat might not. So really what we want to know in order to determine their welfare is both the health and natural living, how that combines together to determine how they feel. So do they feel good or bad about their living situation? So we can't really say overall whether the shelter cat or feral cat has better welfare, since it's pretty situation specific. In some cases, a shelter cat might feel better. In other cases, it might be the stray cat. But it really comes down to how they feel. So health is a really key factor in determining an animal's welfare, but it's not the only thing that matters. So there are some limitations if we only look at health and ignore other things. So an example of this would be overfeeding ewes. So a ewe that is fat is more likely to have some health conditions like an increased risk of prolapse, but they might feel okay. So even though they're in this kind of unhealthy condition, they don't feel bad. They feel pretty good because they're eating what they want to eat. You could also have the opposite situation where an animal looks really healthy, but might not actually feel very good. So limit feeding in sows is one example of that, where they are fed less than what they would eat if they were free to eat as they wanted, in order to make sure that they have a good body condition, because pigs are bred to want to eat a lot, to put on weight, but with sows, we don't want to overfeed them to make sure that they're in a good body condition to give birth. So they can have a good body condition, but they'll be feeling hungry all the time. So in that case, their welfare is actually not matching up with their health. And what happens, or one of the things that we see with this hunger is an increase in abnormal behaviors. So bar biting is a very common abnormal behavior in pigs that is due to a number of different factors. So limit feeding is one of them, a lack of enrichment in their environment is another, but it indicates that something is missing in their environment. So in this case, it indicates that they are probably feeling hungry and some kind of adjustment in their diet is necessary. So on the other end, we have natural living, which is also really important for welfare, but again, is not the only thing that matters. So if we look at an example of a lame cow on pasture, like in this example, you can see that this cow is not walking fully on all of her legs, so she's lame in one of her back legs. And in this case, she's out on pasture. She's able to express her natural grazing behavior, which is a very motivated behavior, and cows is a really important behavior for them. But she's also likely in pain from her lame leg. So again, we want to make sure we're looking at both natural living as well as health factors when we're talking about welfare. So what it comes down to is really how the animal feels. That's the key thing that matters at the end of the day. And a really good way to demonstrate this is with a tomato plant. So we can talk about a tomato plant being diseased, being nutrient deficient, so they're not getting enough food. They can be damaged, so they could snap off one of their branches, and they could also have an unnatural life. So like in this photo here, this is clearly not how a tomato would grow naturally. So in this case, we can talk about concerns with health and natural living for a tomato plant, but it doesn't make sense to talk about tomato welfare. We never hear anyone talk about the welfare of a tomato. And that's because they don't have feelings. Whereas if you look at a chicken, it can be diseased and suffer from illness. They can be nutrient deficient and suffer from hunger. They could be damaged and suffer from pain. And they can also have an unnatural life and suffer from fear, frustration, and anxiety. So that key difference between the tomato and the chicken is that the chicken is feeling something as a result of these conditions that the tomato plant is not. So that's why we talk about chicken welfare, not tomato welfare. So really simple definition of animal welfare is really how the animal feels, and that can range on a spectrum of negative feelings to positive feelings. So from negative ones like fear, frustration, pain, to positive ones like joy or anticipation or excitement. And this is a quote from Ian Duncan. So he's a professor, retired professor at University of WYLP in Canada. And he really promoted this idea that feelings are the only thing that matters when we're talking about animal welfare. So health and natural living are really important, but they matter in that they influence how the animal feels. Okay, so since welfare has all to do with feelings, feelings in turn require consciousness. So in order for an animal to be able to feel something, they have to have consciousness. They have to be aware of their surroundings. So we can ask, do non-human mammals have consciousness? What about birds? What about octopuses? Do flies have consciousness? So I'm going to ask you guys this. So which of these animals do you think have consciousness? So it's a multiple answer response, so you can select more than one. So non-human mammals, so that includes a lot of different animals like rodents, all of most of our livestock animals, horses, rabbits, so plenty of different ones, primates, and then birds, octopuses, and flies. Okay, so it's 86%, great. So I don't know if everyone else can see the results, but we're looking at about, the majority of you guys said that non-human mammals have consciousness. So 83%, 73% said birds have consciousness, 63% said octopuses, and 45% of you guys said flies. So that basically comes out as you'd expect, where the vast majority agree that mammals have consciousness, and the smallest majority agree that flies have consciousness. So this whole question of animal consciousness has been a matter of debate for years and years, or really for centuries. And we have Oh, there we go. Recently, as of 10 years ago, we have reached a scientific consensus. So there was a group of prominent scientists that came together and they declared that a lot of different animals are conscious beings. So the evidence shows that mammals, birds, octopuses, and a whole range of other species share these neurological features, so brain structures that are responsible for producing consciousness in humans. So what is this? We have this scientific consensus that a lot of animals have consciousness and so also have the capacity to suffer, and is relevant for us to talk about their welfare. So the jury's still out on whether flies have consciousness. There's some very limited evidence to suggest maybe they do, but definitely there's no clear consensus on insects in general at this moment. So stay tuned. Okay, so now that we've talked about what animal welfare is, how do we go about assessing it scientifically? So really at the heart of this question is really, we want to know what makes an animal happy. And a good starting point for that is to ask ourselves what makes us happy. So we do share a lot of similarities with other species in the animal kingdom. So this is a good starting point for us to figure out what makes an animal happy. So I'm going to ask you this question. What makes you happy? So this is multiple answer response, so you can select more than one. So hanging out with friends, spending time alone, eating tasty food, exercise, solving a problem, or sleeping.
Looks like there might be a few teenagers in the crowd if sleeping's a high priority.
Yeah.
Although I enjoy my sleep too, so, and I'm not a teenager, so I don't know.
That one is high on my list.
Yep. Yeah, hanging out with friends, being social, that is definitely highly satisfying and emotionally awesome, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think all of these things are
Yeah, really good
positive.
participation on this one. I'll end the poll and we can look at it.
All right. Okay, so 87% of you said hanging out with friends, which makes a lot of sense because we are a very social species. And a lot of our domesticated species are social. So the vast majority are a social species that also really value spending time with other members of their species. Also spending time alone, about 48% of you guys said that, which is also really important that we all have some downtime, right? So just maybe hole up in your room for a few hours just to have that me time. And animals, for a lot of animals, it's the same way, where there's that need to have a space to retreat to, so you don't always have to be forced to interact with others all the time. Eating tasty food. So again, so about 67% of you. For most species, I'd say all species, that's a really key driving factor of behavior. It's really important for us to eat food to survive. So that also is associated with really positive feelings to promote that behavior. Exercise, again, is really key to health, and it makes us happier. It also makes a lot of animals happier. The research shows that a lot of species are highly motivated to exercise. Solving a problem, about 35% of you said that. So this is an interesting one because certain types of problems can be really rewarding to solve. And there's some really cool research out there that shows that animals will engage in problem solving, even when they have the option, for example, to have food that's freely available to them. Instead, they'll work on a problem in order to access that food. So they'll actually put more work into getting that food rather than just having easy access to it. Sleeping, like 67% of you, I definitely feel you there. And same with every species, all species need to sleep in order to survive. So it is also associated with really positive emotions. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that. Okay, so asking ourselves happy is a really good starting point to understand what might make an animal happy, but it does have limitations. So we are all different species, so we're unique and we're different from a cat. Cat is different from a chicken. So we all need slightly different things. So it doesn't make sense to say just because we really like ice cream that a chicken is going to like ice cream as well. So each species has a different way of perceiving the world. And this is actually an example of how we would see the world on the left and how a dog would see that same image on the right. So you can see that their vision is very different from human vision. And that's just one sense. So we can also look at differences in the other senses like touch and smell. So that all affects the animals interact with the world and what is important to them. So we can't just assume because something is important to us that it has to be important to an animal. So the good news is that it is possible to be scientific about feelings. And this is really what is behind the whole idea of animal welfare science. So this is a science that aims to improve animals' lives in an evidence-based way. So not just based on people's opinions, but what the animal is actually telling us. So we do this by evaluating how animals respond behaviorally as well as physiologically. So this has to do with the things that are happening inside the animal's body, and looking at how they respond in these ways to practices and different types of management factors that happen in their environment. We can also find ways to ask animals what is important to them. So I'll give an example of this in a little bit. So why do we need a science of animal welfare? So if we rely just on people's opinions, we have a whole spectrum of where people land. So on one extreme, there's people that believe that animals don't feel anything. And then on the other extreme, there's people that believe animals feel all the same things that we do. And this is really just based on opinions rather than actual scientific observations. So by going out and looking at the animal's behavior, taking physiological samples, so looking at their heart rate, looking at their brain activity, that gives us an idea of what is important to the animal and what they're feeling that we can't tell from just talking about it in a study or something. So the science of animal welfare is a way to be really objective about what is important to an animal. And this has been really critical for animal agriculture and the improvements that we've seen in the last few decades. A lot of that comes out of animal welfare science and being able to recognize what's important to the animal and having them tell us rather than us assuming things about what we think they need. So this is a video from YouTube. It's a viral video it's a little bit old at this point, so about 10 years ago, but I still remember it really clearly when it happened. So this is a slow loris. They're a type of primate. They're called slow lorises because they move very, very slowly. And they live in the wild, but they have been, they were sold for the pet trade. And they were very popular about 10 years ago because of a video, this particular video. So I'm going to play it for you. So this is a slow loris being tickled. And you can see that his arms are raised above his head. And it's the exact same behavior that we would do if we were being tickled and really enjoyed it and wanted to be tickled more. Except with the slow loris, this is actually a defense behavior. So when the slow loris raises their arms, there's a venomous gland right around the armpit. And so this slow loris is actually really afraid right now and is responding in defense to being tickled. But people saw this video and they believed that the slow loris was enjoying it and it was really cute. And so the slow loris ended up being sold in the illegal pet trade. Chuckling and distracting. So they were sold across the world for this illegal pet trade, and they really are terrible pets. They're super afraid of humans. And so this demonstrates the importance of being able to come from an animal-centered view instead of focusing on what people think the animal is feeling, really asking the animal what they are feeling by looking into their behavior and looking at this behavior in other contexts, which is how we realize that this arm raising is a defense mechanism. Okay, so how do we know what an animal is feeling? So we can look at signs of stress. So this could be physiological changes. So those are changes that happen inside the body, like changes in heart rate, or changes in levels of stress hormones in your blood, or brain activity. Or we can also look at behavioral changes, so how the animal interacts with their environment. So as an example, we can look at despedding, which is a procedure that's done in dairy cattle to remove the horn bud to prevent it from growing into a horn and causing injuries to animals and to humans. So this is done by applying, or can be done by applying a heated iron to the horn bud when the calf is young. So at this point, the horn hasn't yet erupted out of the skull. And this causes a very severe burn. And what we see is that in the hours after despedding, the calves' levels of stress hormones increase. So cortisol is an example of a stress hormone that increases after despedding. We see an increase in heart rate and behaviors that are directed to the wound, like head shaking, head rubbing, and ear flicking. We also see a decrease in play behavior. And that response is reduced if we give the calf painkillers before despedding. So that's an example of how we can use signs of stress to understand what the animal might be feeling. We can also ask them what they need. And we can do this through preference tests. So we'll do a little mini preference test now. So I'll ask you guys, what do you prefer? Do you prefer a Twix or a Kit Kat?
Yeah, Sarah and I had quite the conversation on this candy selection. So we'll see if they agree with us or not.
It's pretty close so far.
Yeah.
Almost tied. All right. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like that's it. I'll end the poll here. Share the results. Somebody in the Q&A said dark chocolate, which is much more healthy for you. Good job, Joseph.
That would be my answer too if I had that option. Yeah. Okay, so we have 40% said Twix and 52% said Kit Kat. So that's very close, too close to call. So we just did a preference test right there. So gave you the choice of two options and you decided which one you preferred. So we can do the same thing with animals in a slightly different way. So a preference test is a way of an animal telling us what they want and what they don't want. So it gives us an idea of how they view the world. So one example of this is a preference test that I did during my PhD to see if despedded calves prefer pain relief compared to calves that are not despedded. So I trained them to make this association between a board. So this is a black plywood board on the right side of their home pen. And whenever this board was out, they received an injection of pain relief. So they learned to associate that board with pain disappearing. And then if they received a striped board on the left side of their pen, that was paired with an injection that was not pain relief. So it was just a control substance. It didn't change the way that they felt at all. So after they learned those associations, they were presented with both of these boards. So this black board that they learned would give them pain relief, and the striped board that they learned would not give them pain relief. And we looked to see what the despedded calves and what the non-despedded calves preferred. So this is a video of one of the despedded calves. So she pops out of her hutch and she goes for the pain relief board. And what we saw when we did this test with a lot of different calves was that overall, the despedded calves preferred the pain relief board compared to the non-pain relief board, while the non-despedded calves did not have a preference. So we saw this preference 3 weeks after disbudding, which suggested that the disbudded calves are still experiencing pain 3 weeks after they're disbudded. So those were examples of how we can assess how an animal is feeling using changes in their behavior, their physiology, and also by asking them what they want through preference tests. So we're going to move on now to what we can do to make these animals happy, and I'll turn it over to Bernie.
Okay, so this part, we wanted to take some of the things you've learned from Dr. Adcock and her experience and really apply it, especially those of you that have animals at home that you show or will be getting, but also this applies to your everyday companion animals, right? Your dogs, your cats, guinea pigs, other cool animals that you have at home, maybe even reptiles, not at our house, but maybe at yours. So one of the things that really kind of takes into context in a really short way of what Sarah has been sharing is how do we assess or all the different things that we want animals to have the ability to do. And so long ago, these 5 freedoms were illustrated to help us understand animal care and animal well-being. And as stated here, you can't really have one without the other. So care and their welfare go hand in hand. And so here are 5 of them, and many of them we'll just talk here in the next few slides. As you take care of your animals at home, these are some of the things you really should keep in mind as you do so. Making sure that they are free from hunger and thirst, that you provide them that. You provide them so they aren't have any discomfort, that they don't have pain or injury, that they express their normal behavior as much as they are able. And then, freedom from being fearful or having stress. So we'll move, or I guess Sarah's going to move it for me. If you could move to the next slide. So that's just kind of a general research-based type of overview. The next one are, questions to kind of ask yourself. Are your animals thermally comfortable, not too hot or not too cold? And especially up here in the north, we really got to pay attention to this at certain times of the year. So are you providing fans? Are you making sure that you have enough bedding? Is your housing shelter have enough ventilation or areas for old air to go out and fresh air to come in? Are you providing enough space for your animal? And certainly making sure temperature is sound, but certainly not too warm where other things can happen like pneumonia and other types of situations. So making sure there's good clean air that is available for your animal. So if you want to move to the next slide, Sarah, and please add anything, Sarah, as I go here, because I know there was a couple of slides you wanted to add a little bit. Make sure you have clean water and nutritious feed. I was just answering a question in the Q&A about making sure that your animals have fresh and high quality feed that meets their nutritional requirements. Just like we probably shouldn't have too much sugar or soda pop. Probably not make sure your animals aren't getting too many treats, and making sure that their diet is as balanced as yours is at home. And that means eating your vegetables too, everyone. I know that's hard, but make sure you've got your protein, but your vegetables, and same for your animals in terms of minerals, vitamins, carbohydrates, protein, even fats. Okay. Moving to the next one, make sure that there's no risk of injury or disease. I think there might be something here Sarah wants to add. And the only other thing I would add here too with this one is if there is disease or issues, and we talk about this in quality assurance a lot, if you do have to give some animal health products, make sure you read and follow the medication or feed labels and follow them specifically. Sarah, I think you wanted to add something, right?
Yeah, I just add, so in terms of the risk of injury, one thing to keep an eye out for are any kind of sharp objects in the enclosure, any kind of things that they could swallow and possibly choke on. But then also, in addition to looking at these kind of potentially dangerous objects, also looking at the flooring. So really hard surfaces can increase the risk of an animal becoming lame, so having feet or leg problems. And one of the ways, so for example, of dairy cattle, of reducing lameness is to provide soft bedding, like in this example, sand. So like making sure that you're looking at all aspects of the enclosure to reduce that risk of injury. And then related to disease, making sure that the animals are have good hygiene by regularly cleaning out their enclosures. Yeah, and I think that was all I had to add there. So move to the next slide.
All right, and then I think this is one of the last ones before we move into careers, but just, can your animals really perform their behaviors? And I think the one example that I really wanted to kind of hit home here, because that's my, more of my area of expertise, is, sheep like to flock together. That's their natural instinct to protect themselves. And so if you are showing sheep or want to get an animal, sheep, it would be best to get two, not one. You would need two. So make sure you have them together. Or, in other species, I'm sure Sarah could talk a little bit more about like maybe chicken raising. I'm not a chicken raiser, but there's all those different natural behaviors. And then how can you best suit them in the environment you have and perhaps the space you have?
Yeah, the example in the photo of the chicken here is dust bathing. So this is a very highly motivated behavior that they do to keep their feathers clean. But if they don't have access to dirt to dust bathe in, they show signs of frustration. So it is a really important behavior for them to be able to do. And then the other thing I would add would be the opportunities to graze for ruminant species. Those are also really important behaviors that are hardwired into them. So it is something that they really want to be able to do. And there are signs of frustration that appear when they're not able to graze. Okay, so we'll move to our, oh no, sorry, Bernie.
Oh, yeah. And then one of the last ones here is, as many of you may be in the fair, right, in exhibition or have project animals, just making sure you're providing a good light with your animal care at the county fair, state fair, whatever places you might be showcasing your animals. And showing good care, right? So in this case, in this picture, you can see that the young people and their young person and their dad are fitting an animal for show. And many might have a question about why is that animal in that particular apparatus, and it's actually just something that it's like a barber chair for you all when you get your hair cut, or it restrains you so the barber can trim your hair without injury to himself or herself and to you. And so this is the same, right? We're giving this heifer a trim job and getting her all nice and pretty to go to the show ring, or not necessarily the prom, but to the show ring to be shown in front of a judge. So make sure you're explaining those types of things to the public and the fair goers, especially the non-agricultural public, because they generally do not know these things honestly, and they're looking for you to be that voice of knowledge. All right, and then the last thing is, another question is, are you observing your animals daily? This is the big thing, right? This is like the big thing that you want to take home from tonight is when you get your animals, it's not just heading over to your friend's house. You need to look at your dog and feed them and observe them. Are they acting normally? Is there something out of character in their behavior? Are they able to exercise and move around like they normally do? So, asking yourself those questions and making sure you're checking them every day, twice a day, maybe numerous times during the day.
All right, so we're going to move on to our last topic of careers in animal welfare. So this is a really exciting area because there's a lot of different options. So mostly on the options within the farm animal world, and then touch on some that are outside with other animal areas. So there's a lot of opportunities within the industry to be involved in animal welfare. So you could work in a kind of advising capacity for industry organizations. So for example, the National Pork Board or the National Chicken Council. There's plenty of others. You could work for producers, so Smithfield and Tyson are major producers, or animal health companies like Elanco. Food companies and purchasers, so McDonald's would be a really familiar one. Danone is a dairy food company, so they make the yogurts like Activia, a range of other dairy products. IKEA, so all of these companies have welfare advisors that help them to source their products from welfare-friendly sources. Animal welfare certification programs, so you might be familiar with some of these. Certified Humane is one, animal welfare approved. There's several options out there, and they all work by sending auditors out to inspect the farms to see if they meet the criteria in their programs. So these auditing jobs are one opportunity to get involved in these certification programs. And they also have people that work like on actually writing the program itself, so coming up with the criteria for these programs. The United States Department of Agriculture has positions related to welfare. Some are research related, others are more administrative. There's also, of course, research and teaching options, so within universities, but also opportunities to teach at other levels. So teaching as a high school teacher, you could teach a course on animal welfare. Nonprofits and charities, so Animal Welfare Institute, World Animal Protection, the University's Federation for Animal Welfare, lots of other ones, all rely on some expertise in animal welfare. And finally, of course, this is probably the most obvious one, but veterinary medicine. So we do always need vets to make sure that the animals are healthy and be able to treat and prevent disease. So outside of farm animals, there's lots of other options too, with zoo, companion, and lab animals. I won't go into all of these, but just throwing it out there so you can see what a range of different options there are in this field. There's also a lot of different types of educational requirements. So there's some careers like an animal technician, so that could be a veterinary technician or an animal care technician, where you'd need an associate's degree. So that would usually be a 2-year program. A lot of these careers usually require a bachelor's degree in some kind of science-related discipline like biology, animal science, zoology, psychology, or neuroscience. And then there's some careers that do require more advanced degrees like master's, PhD, or DVM, so that's a doctor of veterinary medicine. But there really is a range. So there's a place for everyone in animal welfare, and you don't have to follow a specific educational path. There's a lot of different ways to get involved in animal welfare. All right, so that's the end of this presentation. I guess I'll stop share.
Yep, if you want to stop sharing, and I will take everybody over to the website here so I can show you where. So if you see the website here, this is where you registered for tonight's activities. Here are 3 things that I really want you to spend a little time on after this evening's over. The first one is a take-home animal observation activity. This is something you can do at home with your family, brothers and sisters, guardians, parents, any of the like. And it really kind of gives you the opportunity to really slow down and really think about how often your animal drinks and so on. Here's some questions to ask yourself and to kind of go through a whole day and see how often your animals do these activities. And then there's some reflection questions to kind of talk through with your parents and folks in your household on what other things that we could do better. What are some ways that we can care for our animal in a better way, or maybe we're doing a great job and maybe we're feeding them too well. So, those types of conversations are always really great at home. So I really make sure you do that. Here are the We Care videos from the National Pork Board. These are all of the videos that they share related to how they care for animals, how they produce safe food, and how they care for the environment. So if you want to take a look at that, that's from the National Pork Producers. And then our wonderful partners here, Caitlin Riley worked really hard on this. She's the communications person for the Wisconsin beef producers over at the Beef Council. And you can see here, there's some really great video about how beef production is done here in Wisconsin and how animals are cared for throughout the system. So there might be some people that you might be familiar with. Here's the Quam family here from Lodi, Wisconsin, a big Angus breeder. And so really great insight that they share. So I really like you to take a look at those things. I'm going to stop my share here. There's a couple of questions, Sarah, in the chat or in the Q&A. I thought maybe you could answer live because I know you're a cat breeder or a cat lover. There's one on how do you stop two cats from fighting? You want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'll do my best, but cat behavior is not, despite owning a cat, I know very little about cat behavior, especially social behavior, since I own just one. But I think it's going to depend a little bit on the environment that they're in and how they were introduced to one another. I wish I could give a definitive answer to this, but I guess what I would do is point you to resources. There are shelters that have behavior specialists on call, so I would call up your local shelter and see if they have a cat behavior specialist or can refer you to one, and they can help you. That's what they're there for, to answer questions like this about problematic behaviors and how to go about correcting them. So I would check out wherever your local shelter is. There's several shelters in Madison, and just ring them up and see if they have tips for you, because they have to deal with this all the time. So sorry, I can't answer the question, but yeah, hopefully that helps.
No, that's good. Others in the chat had asked related to some questions on where the link is to the page to those videos and activities. And that's the same web page that you registered on. I'll put it in the chat just to make sure you all have it. But I try to keep it easy this year, just making sure everything you'll ever need for this is on that one page. There is before we get too far into the questions, if I know some might have to leave, don't forget to fill out the survey. And that will open up as soon as you close the Zoom tonight. So on to some questions. Again, there's one here: in the winter, our chickens get cold. How do we know if they get too cold?
So I would look for any signs of shivering. That would be an indicator that they're too cold. And if they are shivering, there's a lot of different ways to improve the heat. You could use deep litter, so just adding more bedding to the hutch or the coop would be one way to, kind of a low-cost way to improve their warmth. But yeah, other than that, I would go on. I think there's some chicken resource websites, and I would check those out. But I'm not a chicken expert, unfortunately. But I would definitely, if they're shivering, that's a sign that, I would try to keep them warmer.
Looks like there's another one on chicken fighting. How do you stop them? And then maybe there's a question about one of their chickens' feet might have been swollen. What could be some reasons why that could have occurred? And I think that might round up the questions. I think there's maybe one more. I'll let you answer those.
Okay. So yeah, not a chicken expert. So there could be a lot of reasons that they are fighting. Space limitations could be one of them. So just maybe providing, not always the most straightforward thing to do, but trying to provide more space for each chicken could help with that issue. Yeah, and it could also be the food source. So making sure that they have access to feed sources where they don't have to compete for the same one. So avoiding that pecking order. But yeah, there could be several other reasons for it, but I can't tell you specifically. So the chicken's foot that's swollen, one risk factor for that is litter. So making sure that the litter is not too moist, because that can lead to foot problems. So that would be the first thing I would take a look at, would be the litter condition, and seeing if it could be drier. Other than that, potentially it could have resulted from an injury. So checking the environment for any kind of sharp objects. But yeah, typically it's moist litter that is usually the culprit.
Okay, good. There was one question here. Let's see. Something about highlight environment that the animal's supposed to be in. So pen, moving animal pastures, etc. So I don't know if that's just a comment or what that might be, but I think it's just, again, kind of probably sorting back to, natural behaviors, being able for that animal to exhibit those natural behaviors throughout their life in some way. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Sarah.
No, I think I agree with you, and just making sure that the environment matches their natural habitat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see, there's a question here in the career area. If you want to help with animal welfare, career as a regenerative farmer, rancher as a career is a great way to. Yep. Any other thoughts if you want to share?
No, that's a great suggestion.
Yep. Okay, well, there's a lot of questions in here kind of circulating about, about things that they might be going through at home. If I guess there's, if bulls are kind of biting on their pens, what would that mean? Kind of similar to the sow scenario. Do you want to speak to that and what, like maybe a bovine behavior expression in that way is meaning?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this is referring to calves or adults, but sometimes
bulls. So I would say adult bulls. Yeah.
Okay. So I've seen this behavior more in the context of calves, where that it usually is an indication of some kind of a lack of forage potentially, or not enough other types of enrichment, not enough opportunities to suck on things. For adult animals, I think I don't know if there's a lot of research on that and if we really know the reason why, but most of these oral behaviors that are problematic have something to do with deficiency in their diet, something that is not quite where it needs to be in terms of their food. So I think it would be related to that, but I don't know if we can actually say much more on that, because I don't think people have really looked into that behavior.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. One question, I think we'll end this with the last question, since we're just a minute before 8. What are you currently researching or studying right now, Dr. Adcock? That's a great question from Levi and Rachel. We'll end with that question. And Joseph says thanks. So share what you're studying and what you're hoping to be maybe writing grants on, or some future work. You want to share that?
Yeah, so I'm currently working with sheep. I'm working at the Arlington sheep facility with UW, and we're looking at social behaviors. So who they interact with, when they interact with them, and how that's affected by diseases and injuries. So we're looking at how mastitis affects social interactions to see if we can use these social behaviors as a way to predict when mastitis is happening. Because one of the challenges is that we don't catch it. It's difficult to catch early on with these meat flocks. So being able to have some kind of behavioral indicator to tell us when they might be experiencing mastitis would be really useful. And the other thing that we're doing is, instead of looking at these behaviors visually, we're using these tags that the animals wear. So we fitted them with these custom made harnesses, and they wear these tags that record their position in the barn constantly. So from that, we're able to see who they're close to in the pen and at what time of day. So we can get their behavior using this automated method instead of having to visually observe them. So hopefully that can create some useful tools for detecting disease. But yeah, so that's what we're currently working on. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that's a great one. And yes, there's stuff going on in the chat. Yeah, do you know Todd Taylor? And I'm like, yeah. Dr. Adcock does, myself, there's lots of, Todd's our, sheep superhero at UW-Madison. So thankfully we have him for sure. And I think he was on tonight. I don't know if he still is, but he was on earlier. So so everyone, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Thanks so much, Doctor. I guess I could put my video back on. Give her the nice little applause. Thanks, Dr. Adcock, for being on with us tonight. We learned so much more about animal care and welfare, and looking forward to you all completing that wonderful survey that's going to pop up when you leave here tonight, and give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it, and this is helpful to us in our roles here to continue to provide you this type of work and information each and every month here, January through May. But it also helps us bring more information that y'all want to hear about too. So thanks again. Don't forget to check out those YouTube videos and the take-home activity, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks again, Dr. Adcock. And then don't forget to hit us up February. We're going to talk about technology and precision agriculture. We're going to talk about tractors that drive on their own. We're going to maybe throw in some pictures of Sarah's work up at the sheep unit with some blankets she's been putting on lambs. We'll probably throw some camera on how we capture meat grading, quality grading in processing plants. So lots of different things we're going to learn next month. So don't forget to sign up and register for that. So thanks, everybody. Have a good night.